It was a normal Friday night until the knock on my apartment door changed everything. The sound was sharp, insistent, not like a delivery driver or a neighbor. I was on my couch, feet tucked under me, a half-empty bowl of popcorn on the coffee table. The city lights of Orlando twinkled through my window. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet that I had earned. That knock shattered it. When I opened the door, my estranged mother stood there with a forced smile. Beside her, my half-brother leaned against the doorframe, scrolling on his phone like he owned the place. 23 years had passed since I'd last seen her in person. She looked different, but the feeling in my gut was the same. It was the feeling of a storm gathering. "Elena," she said sweetly, her voice a little too high. "We need your help." My name is Elena Rossi. I'm 32 years old, a senior data analyst. I live in a city 1,000 miles from where I grew up. I worked my way out of nothing, built a life from the dust she left behind. I thought I was safe. But that night, I learned that some ghosts don't just haunt you. They knock on your door and ask for money. I was 9 years old when my mother, Julia Rossi, left. It wasn't a dramatic screaming fight that ended with a slammed door. It was quiet. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. I came home from school to find a single suitcase by the front door. She knelt down, her hands on my shoulders. Her perfume, the one that always smelled like gardenias, felt heavy in the air. "I need to go away for a while, sweetie," she said. "I need to find myself." I didn't understand what that meant. How could a person lose themselves? I just nodded, my throat tight. I remember watching from the window as she got into a taxi. She didn't look back. Not once. My dad, Frank Rossi, came home from the diner that night looking like he'd aged 10 years in a single day. He found me on the couch, still in my school clothes, clutching the note she'd left on the kitchen table. It was short, full of empty words about needing space and a different life. He sat down next to me, pulled me into his arms, and we just stayed there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing in on us. Our life became a two-person team. Dad worked from dawn until long after midnight at the Blue Plate Diner, the small eatery he co-owned. He was the cook, the busboy, and the maintenance man. Our world smelled like burnt coffee, maple syrup, and cleaning supplies. He'd come home smelling of grease and exhaustion, his hands rough and calloused, but he always had a smile for me. "You and me, kid," he'd say, ruffling my hair. "That's all we need." He was my rock. He taught me how to change a tire and how to make the perfect scrambled eggs. He sat with me at the kitchen table while I did my homework, even when his eyes were drooping shut from a 16-hour shift. We didn't have much money. Our clothes came from thrift stores. Dinner was often whatever was left over from the diner. But we had each other. We were a closed loop, a complete circle. We found out about her new life through a Christmas card that arrived 2 years after she left. It was addressed only to me. Inside was a picture of her smiling, standing next to a man in a crisp suit. A little boy with blonde hair stood in front of them holding a sign that said, "Happy Holidays from the Vances." Her name, Julia, was signed at the bottom. There was no note, no explanation, just a picture of her new family. My new half-brother, Caleb Vance, a new husband, a new life in Florida, a world away from the gray Ohio winters. Dad saw the card. I watched his face crumble for just a second before he put his brave smile back on. He threw the card in the trash. "We don't need that," he said, his voice quiet but firm. He never spoke a bad word about her. When I asked questions, he'd just say, "Your mom was looking for something different. Elena." He tried to protect me from the truth, but I knew she hadn't just left to find herself. She had replaced us. The years passed. Life was hard, but it was simple. I spent my afternoons after school at the diner, doing my homework in a booth in the back corner. I watched my dad work, his movements efficient and tireless. He greeted every customer by name, poured them coffee, and listened to their stories. He was a good man, a steady man, the kind of person my mother was not. I never heard from her again. No birthday cards, no phone calls. She had vanished from our world, leaving behind a hole that my dad and I learned to live around. We filled it with hard work, with quiet evenings watching old movies, with the shared understanding that we were survivors. We had survived her, and for a long time, I truly believed that was all we needed. The drive to succeed wasn't just a desire. It was a necessity. It was woven into the very fabric of my being from the moment I understood that my dad's tired eyes were the price of our survival. I started working the day I turned 16. My first job was washing dishes at the Blue Plate Diner on weekends. The steam burned my face and the smell of old food clung to my clothes. But the $50 I brought home each week felt like a fortune. It was $50 less that my dad had to worry about. Soon, one job wasn't enough. I started babysitting, stocking shelves at the grocery store at 4 a.m., and cleaning offices on weekends. My hands were always raw. My body always ached. But my resolve never wavered. Every dollar I earned was a brick in the wall I was building around myself and my dad. School was my escape. In the world of numbers and logic, everything made sense. I taught myself to code from old books. Data became my passion. It was the story behind the chaos. My guidance counselor told me I had a shot at a scholarship. That became my mantra. We couldn't afford college otherwise. My dad had already taken out a second mortgage on our tiny house just to keep the diner afloat. The day my acceptance letter came from the University of Central Florida with a full academic scholarship, I cried for the first time in years. I called my dad at the diner. "You did it, kid," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." College was a different kind of struggle. I was surrounded by wealth I couldn't comprehend, while I lived on instant noodles and black coffee. But I graduated with top honors and landed a job at a tech firm in Orlando. Slowly, carefully, I built my life. I paid off my student loans, I climbed the ladder. By the time I was 30, I bought a small 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the skyline. The first thing I did was set up an automatic monthly transfer to my dad's bank account. It was enough to help him hire another cook. I had broken the cycle. Or so I thought. When I opened the door that Friday night, she was a stranger wearing my mother's face. The 23 years had been kind to her, or at least her husband's money had been. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit and a designer handbag. This was not the woman in faded jeans who had left a note on the kitchen table. "Elena, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth. She hugged me, but I stood stiffly, smelling her expensive perfume. It smelled like ambition. Behind her, Caleb shuffled in, ignoring me to flop onto my gray linen couch. "Nice place," he muttered, eyes glued to his phone. Julia sat down, her eyes scanning my apartment, calculating the cost of my furniture. "You've done so well for yourself," she said. "What are you doing here, Julia?" I asked. I couldn't call her mom. Her smile tightened. "Can't a mother visit her daughter?" A mother would have called first. A mother would have visited sometime in the last 2 decades. She launched into a rehearsed speech about mistakes and missing me. But she quickly pivoted to the real reason. "We need your help. It's about Caleb. He's been accepted to a private university. It's nearly $60,000 a year." I stared at her. "We were hoping you could help out," she said. "We've worked out the numbers. $3,000 a month should do it." $3,000 a month. It was an insult. It was a transaction. "No," I said. The next morning, she texted me, asking to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. At the cafe, she played the victim, claiming my father had poisoned me against her, that he had kept her away. It was a lie. I remembered him waiting by the phone on my birthdays. Then Caleb arrived, uninvited, demanding a new Mustang for college. "You make 6 figures, right? What's the big deal?" "The big deal," I said, my voice steady, "is that it's my money. I earned it. And I am not giving you or your mother a single cent." Julia's mask fell. "You are a selfish, ungrateful child," she snapped. "I gave you life. And then you walked out of it." I shot back. "You don't get to come back 23 years later and present a bill." I walked out of that cafe, leaving them stunned. I felt free, but also deeply grieved for the mother I never had. However, the war wasn't over. That afternoon, they showed up at my door again. Julia feigned a medical emergency, low blood sugar, to get me to open up. Like a fool, I let them in for a glass of water. While Julia distracted me in the kitchen, Caleb sat at my desk, I caught him trying to access my banking app. "Get away from my computer," I screamed. He smirked. "Just checking if you were lying about being able to afford it." Then I saw the email open on the screen. He had hacked my father's email account to find a forwarded document from my HR department containing my salary details. They had planned this. They had dug up my financial information to extort me. "Get out," I commanded, pointing to the door. "Get out before I call the police." I slammed the door behind them and immediately called my dad. Then a lawyer. We filed a restraining order. 2 weeks later, my bank blocked a fraudulent transfer attempt of $10,000. They had tried to steal from me. That was the final proof. This wasn't family. It was a crime. The year that followed was quiet. The restraining order worked. News traveled that Julia's husband divorced her, and she and Caleb were left with nothing. I took no joy in it, but I felt a sense of justice. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Nora Lynn. She helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for my mother's choices. I also realized who my true family was, my friends who had stood by me, and my dad. If this story touches you, please subscribe and share the video to help me grow. With my friends' help, I founded the Rossi Foundation. It was a scholarship program for low-income kids from my old neighborhood in Ohio who wanted to study STEM. Kids like me. Each check I signed felt like closing a wound. I was taking the money Julia tried to steal and using it to give others a chance. 2 years later, I flew to Ohio for my dad's retirement party. He had finally sold his half of the Blue Plate Diner. At dinner, I told him I had paid off his mortgage. He cried, and we toasted to the future. "I used to feel like I failed you because she left," he told me. "But family isn't about who leaves. It's about who stays." That night at my hotel, I received one last email from Julia. It was a desperate plea for money, saying they were struggling. I read it once, felt absolutely nothing, and deleted it. I looked out the window at the lights of my hometown. "You took my childhood," I whispered to the darkness, "but you will not have my future." And for the first time in my life, I fell asleep without fear of the knock at the door.